I know I'm capable of this. I know I'm capable of that. But if I keep addressing the problem or what I think is negative or what's been presented to me negative, then how am I going to move forward? So it really starts with addressing and dealing in whatever way you can with that issue.
Well, hello, beautiful, and welcome to another episode of The Gifted Table. Today, we are talking about empowering others. And what better way to empower others but through their own mental health? Right here on The Gifted Table. Welcome to The Gifted Table, beautifuls. Pull your seat up really close, real tight. Get ready because we're about to have an amazing conversation about mental health with leadership, mental health just with women. And who better for us to have this conversation? Pulling up her seat nice and close. It's so close. It's so tight. Please welcome to the table, the one and only, the beautiful Vanessa Hunter. Welcome, Queen.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to you, beautiful. I'm so excited to be here.
Tell the family of The Gifted Table who you are and what you do.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm Vanessa Hunter, and I am what you call a school psychologist in my profession. And I work at a charter school system. Prior to that, though, I worked in a school district. So there's many facets that a school psychologist can work in. But that is currently my employment is in a charter school, and I work primarily with students that are high school in age. We also have a homeschool component, children that are generally elementary to middle school. I help those students that may be experiencing disabilities because of the fact that they have learning problems that's identified either by their parents, their teacher, or themselves. And so I test and assess them with a certain battery of tests that might be applicable to identifying their problem in learning. And then we come up with a plan with other team members that are specialists in their nature, such as teachers that are special education teachers or speech therapists, occupational therapists. Depends on what the need is and what the support area is for the student. And I come up with a plan to help that student be successful in their academic program. So that's my main job. My side hustle is I'm an independent. Is an independent proprietor where I work as an independent psychologist, and I contract with various school districts to do what you call independent evaluations. And those are normally legal, a little bit more legal, maybe because of the parent not agreeing with what the school district came up with the school-based testing. And then they'll ask another psychologist to come in and give a lot more of the testing. And of course, it's a little bit more pricier, but it allows me the freedom to help that parent and or the student to be able to see if whatever was done prior may not have identified some of the areas that should have been because of the fact that they may have been limited on their resources of what they could use and things like that.
Being in education, I am familiar with the role of the school psychologist.
I know you are.
Explain it like that to the people at the Gifted Table, because not everyone is in education. We have several viewers, and I'm so thankful for the family here. But just so they can understand, when we talk about assessing students for their learning disabilities or to see if there is one that they even qualify, it really is a very intentional and it's a very deep process and it takes time to do. What would you say as women leaders and women of color, what are some of the things that we experience with our mental health that maybe we haven't even personally identified?
What I am noticing, because of course, by working with children, I work with parents and primarily mothers, where our challenges come from is the emotional component that is associated with, first of all, accepting the fact that your son or daughter might have some challenges in learning. But it's not just learning. And I probably should have elaborated a little bit even more on the fact that we identify behavioral and emotional problems. There are many unfortunate occurrences that are shootings and things like that at various schools. And these people that have the culprits, if you will, have been adults that when they look back into history, when the investigators look back, they've seen that they may have been someone that had some of these disabilities that are the things that a school psychologist identifies or a mental health professional identifies. And so what plagues us as women is, number one, just the competition of being heard in our roles of jobs and professions, being trusted that we know what we're talking about, even though statistics show most women are successful in those professions that they choose. In mental health, a lot of men may not choose that field for one reason or another, just with the connotation of what they feel might be the situation of making them appear like they're inadequate, when in fact, it's a helpful, supportive profession that everybody basically now is realizing they have a little bit of it. I mean, I even see a therapist because of the fact that I have rounded shoulders from all the things that I've heard and dealt with and experiences over supporting the students that I've serviced, the families that I've serviced, and just even friends and colleagues that I work with or that I'm in organizations with that are dealing with, work-related issues that are challenging them to even be able to continue to do what their role is. I mean, sexual harassment, like I said, being looked at valid in knowing what you're doing in your role. All of those kind of things can play on your psyche, which eventually leads to mental health challenges, possibly, depending on your stability and your wellness.
Yeah. I mean, you've given us a lot. You've unpacked a lot already. Just as women, we find ourselves taking on so many roles. Mm-hmm. And then when we are in that leadership role, be it the mother who's going to the meeting to advocate for her child or find out the information, or be it someone who you're working with and just informally, they're just telling you about their story or sharing what's going on in their workplace, their organization, within their families, and just what that load is like for us. You know what I find interesting is that when I talk to, say, women of my mother's generation or older, you find that, and especially for women of color, and I'm going to say African-American women, it tends to be, if it happens in our house, it stays in our house. We don't tell anybody what's going on in our house. And so I find, just listening to stories, that women tend to have held on to a lot of information, a lot of hurt, a lot of experiences, or just the load that you talk about. You talk about your shoulders being rounded. I mean, that image, just the heaviness of that. But we don't talk about it to others. We internalize it, right? Right.
I was just about to say that. Absolutely. We internalize it because we were brought up not to say anything. What happens in this house stays in this house. And what are we finding nowadays with children is that, what happens is this house stays in this house. And we're finding later that they've been abused and that they've been, and it doesn't have to be physical abuse. Emotional abuse is one of the hardest things to prove. Because of the fact that it's more verbal in nature. And we do carry baggage from our upbringing. We carry baggage from our existence in the present because we are challenged with life. Life is really happening. And you add that to your job and trying to make a difference or just be valid in what your role is. I mean, it can't help but affect you with disappointment, disheartenment, all of those kind of things. And not to mention just trying to earn money to be able to even get the resources of a therapist or someone else that may can listen to you if you so choose to allow yourself to speak because of the fact that you were brought up a certain way. So you're right, generational, cultural, all that plays a factor in how we project and how we get ourselves to wellness, especially mental health.
What would you say are some ways if people just simplify, just take a breath, step back and start focusing on their mental health? What would be some strategies or some things that we could do that's attainable to really say, okay, I got to get my mind right. Like literally, I got to get my mind right.
The first thing is to identify and accept the fact that you do have something you need to target and address. That's the first thing. So what you brought up about not saying anything or keeping quiet, how do we identify to be able to give you strategies? That's first and foremost. So it starts with you to identify that, you know what, I really do have some challenges. I really am depressed. I really do have anxiety. I'm anxious. I'm paranoid, whatever that may be. So first is identifying it. I've always incorporated journaling. Not a lot of people like to write. Nobody wants to write it down, but that's your safe haven to get it off you. That's one way. If you don't like to write, let's say you have a handheld recorder. You can use that in the car nowadays. People use it on their cell phones. You can just talk to that. That way, it's not a person that can make you feel a way by looking at you weird or making you feel insecure about what you're sharing in your truth. You can speak that out into an audio. So the best thing first is to get it off of you, get it out of your spirit. Don't internalize. Then make sure you go back to it and recognize it and say, okay, I need to replace, for instance, negative responses that I give and people don't understand why I'm giving them. Let me first let go of the past and realize I'm here today. And understand that I'm here today. So whatever your pass by is that can get you to a sense of peace, you're going to need that to be able to address whatever that is you're journaling or speaking into the handheld recorder. Another strategy, after you identify things, you take it, you identify it, you address it, and you realize, I'm going to put that away and I'm going to replace it with something else that is beneficial, that I am gifted, as in your gifted table at, that I know I can do, and I don't need anybody else to identify and tell me that I'm doing that or I'm gifted with that. I know I'm capable of this. I know I'm capable of that. But if I keep addressing the problem or what I think is negative or what's been presented to me negative, then how am I going to move forward? So it really starts with addressing and dealing in whatever way you can with that issue.
I love it. And that's powerful things you said. Recognize, release, replace.
Amen. That's good. The 3 R's. Look, we done came up with a good acronym just there.
Look at that. We didn't even know we were gifted like that. As you were speaking, I was thinking like, okay, she's talking to me right now. I remember a time just personally, and just thinking like this, if I'm thinking professionally, but a personal professional thing where I had to recognize how I was communicating with people, my staff on the job or whatever, right? I had to recognize that the way I was communicating, and sometimes it was my nonverbal.
90% of the communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
Very
check
good.
out that episode on the gifted table. We talked about that too.
Exactly.
But I had to recognize how I was communicating to others, right? I had to release that, that's not a cool thing, just because you've been doing it, that's been your practice, it doesn't make it appropriate. Does it make it a good process for you? And neither, or is it going to even help me gain trust or to help sustain the relationship, as a leader? So I had to replace it. You know what I had to replace it with?
What's that?
Listening. Listening more, because we have 2 of these, right?
Sis.
One of these.
That's what they say.
And I do remember journaling about it, about my communication, how I was communicating with others, how I was being received, and why are they
owned it. You owned it, though. You identified it and you owned it. that's what it is. I mean, and I'm not trying to interrupt you, but I want to say this. Even with Alcoholic Anonymous, the first thing they want you to do is address the fact and identify the fact that you are an alcoholic, that you do have that problem. Mm-hmm. Just saying it, I am depressed. I have anxiety symptoms. Some people don't know it's anxiety until, so I get anxious. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. Saying it out, even if you can't say it out, some people can't talk it out. They think it, they write it. There's always a method to identifying what it is.